Remember when American cars ruled the world? Well, not all of them deserve to. The 1960s gave us some of the most bizarre automotive failures ever made. Did you know Ford spent the equivalent of $2.5 billion in today's money on the Edsel only to kill it after just 3 years? Buckle up as we dive into the 15 most detested vehicles that somehow escaped Detroit's design studios. Number 15, 1960 Ford Edsel. The Ford Edsel wasn't just a car. It was automotive's most spectacular failure, a rolling monument to corporate miscalculation. Ford sank $250 million into developing what they called the car of the future, only to kill it in 1960 after just 3 years and losses that would equal $2.5 billion today. What made it so terrible? Start with that front grille, mockingly called the horse collar, but more often compared to less family-friendly body parts. Time magazine brutally described it as looking like an Oldsmobile sucking a lemon. The vertical chrome oval stood out like a sore thumb in an era of horizontal lines and sleek simplicity. Behind the wheel, drivers faced a bizarre teletouch transmission system with buttons placed in the center of the steering wheel, causing countless drivers to accidentally shift into reverse when trying to honk the horn. The quality control was abysmal, with tales of Edsels arriving at dealerships with engines missing or doors that wouldn't close. The Edsel name became synonymous with failure, entering the American lexicon as shorthand for any colossal business disaster. Ford's marketing promised revolutionary features but delivered mediocrity at premium prices during a recession. Today, the Edsel's spectacular flameout is taught in business schools worldwide as the textbook case of how not to launch a product. Number 14, 1962 Dodge Dart 413. The 1962 Dodge Dart 413 looked like someone took 3 different cars and smashed them together in a junkyard compactor. Dodge's attempt to cram muscle car performance into the ungainly Dart body created one of the most awkward-looking vehicles ever to roll off an assembly line. Styling chief Virgil Exner had just been ordered to downsize Chrysler's designs at the last minute based on a false rumor that Chevrolet was shrinking their cars. The result? A too small body with too large features, creating proportions so bizarre that automotive journalists openly mocked its appearance. Car and Driver described it as wearing a suit 3 sizes too big for its frame. The front end featured bizarre reversed slant headlights, while the rear showcased absurdly oversized fins that looked outdated the moment they left the factory. Topping off this design disaster was a fake spare tire bulge on the trunk, making it look like the car had a growth that needed medical attention. Despite packing the monstrous 413 cubic inch max wedge V8 producing 410 horsepower, the Dart's styling was so off-putting that dealers struggled to move inventory. Legendary car designer Bill Mitchell of GM reportedly kept photos of the '62 Dart in his office, not for inspiration, but as a warning to his team of what happens when design goes terribly wrong. Number 13, 1960 Plymouth Valiant. The 1960 Plymouth Valiant looked like it was designed by a committee of people who actively hated each other. This compact car featured such a bizarre mishmash of styling elements that automotive writers struggled to find words to describe its appearance, with one famously calling it a frog designed by Salvador Dali. Chrysler's head designer Virgil Exner was notorious for his forward-look styling, but with the Valiant, he went completely off the rails. The front featured bizarre toilet seat headlight surrounds, while the sides were slashed with random chrome strips that served no purpose. The rear fenders had strange fake spare tire bulges, and the whole car was topped with a fake Continental kit. Inside, things weren't much better. The dashboard resembled an alien spacecraft, with gauges seemingly placed at random and a push-button transmission selector that confused first-time drivers. Road and Track called it the most peculiar arrangement of instruments we've ever encountered. The Valiant's Slant 6 engine was actually quite reliable, which is perhaps the cruelest joke. Some of these mechanical cockroaches are still on the road, subjecting new generations to their visual assault. When competitor American Motors created their own compact car, they reportedly used the Valiant as a reference for everything we should avoid doing. Number 12, 1961 Rambler Ambassador. The 1961 Rambler Ambassador was the automotive equivalent of showing up to prom in your dad's ill-fitting suit. American Motors Corporation created this oddity by grafting their compact Rambler's front end onto the body of their larger Nash, resulting in proportions so bizarre that automotive writers openly questioned whether AMC's designers had ever seen a car before. What made the Ambassador truly painful was AMC's desperate attempt to market it as a luxury vehicle while using cheap, garish materials. The interior featured vinyl upholstery in colors described by car and driver as somewhere between a circus tent and a Miami retirement home. The dashboard was a sea of chrome-plated plastic trying desperately to look expensive, but failing spectacularly. Performance was equally disappointing, with the Ambassador's anemic 327 cubic inch V8 producing just 270 horsepower, woefully inadequate for moving its substantial bulk. Road tests of the period noted that the Ambassador's acceleration could be timed with a calendar rather than a stopwatch. AMC's ad campaign touted the Ambassador as a fine car at half the fine car price, but as one dealer reportedly quipped, it's half a fine car at a full price. Sales were so dismal that AMC was forced to completely redesign the Ambassador for 1962, quietly hoping everyone would forget this awkward stepchild of American automotive design. Number 11, 1965 Chevrolet Corvair Monza. The 1965 Chevrolet Corvair Monza earned the dubious honor of being the only car literally called unsafe at any speed in Ralph Nader's famous book. This rear-engined oddity became the poster child for Detroit's alleged disregard for consumer safety, with Nader claiming GM deliberately designed in lethality to save a few dollars per car. The Corvair's biggest sin was its swing-axle rear suspension, which could cause the rear wheels to tuck under during sharp turns, resulting in sudden, catastrophic oversteer. Combine this with a rear-heavy weight distribution, and you had a car that could flip over if taken through a corner too quickly. Car and Driver magazine called it the most treacherous handling we've experienced in a production vehicle. GM made matters worse by specifying different tire pressures for front and rear wheels, something most owners ignored. This turned the already questionable handling into a genuine hazard, with numerous accidents attributed to the design flaw. The controversy became so intense that GM reportedly hired private investigators to dig up dirt on Nader, leading to a successful invasion of privacy lawsuit. Though GM corrected the suspension flaws by 1965, the damage was done. The Corvair became synonymous with corporate negligence, and the resulting public outcry led directly to the creation of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The car that was meant to revolutionize American automotive design instead revolutionized auto safety regulation. Number 10, 1968 AMC AMX. The 1968 AMC AMX was like the awkward kid at school, trying desperately to hang with the cool crowd of muscle cars. American Motors Corporation, perpetually the underdog of Detroit's Big Four, attempted to create their own version of a Mustang or Camaro, but ended up with what Car and Driver famously described as a javelin that someone left in the dryer too long. AMC's weird compromise of chopping nearly a foot from their already mediocre javelin resulted in bizarre proportions that automotive journalists couldn't stop mocking. With its stubby body and long hood, the AMX looked perpetually ready to tip forward. Road and Track quipped it had the stance of a bulldog suffering from hip dysplasia. The interior was equally problematic, featuring vinyl seats in garish colors that one automotive writer described as what happens when your crayon box melts in the sun. The shortened wheelbase meant the AMX could only accommodate 2 passengers, eliminating the practicality of rear seats without delivering the sleekness of a true sports car. While its optional 390 cubic inch V8 provided decent straight-line speed, the AMX's crude suspension and nose-heavy weight distribution made cornering an adventure in terror. Despite AMC's desperate marketing campaign proclaiming, "The AMX is for people who can't wait," most buyers did exactly that, waited for something better to come along from Ford, GM, or Chrysler. Number 9, 1960 Chevrolet Corvair. The 1960 Chevrolet Corvair was Detroit's bizarre experiment in creating an American Volkswagen that went spectacularly wrong. GM's first major foray into compact cars featured a rear-mounted air-cooled engine, revolutionary for an American car, but implemented with typical GM corner cutting that would eventually make Ralph Nader famous. The Corvair's unconventional design created issues from day one. The air-cooled flat-six engine had a nasty habit of overheating, sometimes resulting in cracked cylinder heads or, In extreme cases, engine fires. To make matters worse, early models leaked oil like it was going out of style, with owners joking that if your Corvair wasn't leaving puddles, it was probably out of oil. But the car's deadliest flaw was its suspension. The original swing-axle rear suspension design could cause the rear wheels to tuck under during hard cornering, leading to catastrophic oversteer and potential rollovers. Car and Driver magazine noted that turning the steering wheel in a Corvair sometimes feels like making a suggestion rather than giving a command. What truly killed the Corvair's reputation was GM's response to these issues. Internal memos revealed that GM executives knew about the handling problems, but determined it would be cheaper to settle lawsuits than fix the design. This callous calculation became the centerpiece of Nader's book and permanently damaged the public's trust in Detroit's commitment to safety. Number 8. 1962 Studebaker Lark. The 1962 Studebaker Lark was automotive evidence that you can't polish a turd, no matter how much chrome you slap on it. By 1962, Studebaker was desperately trying to stay relevant in the American car market, and their solution was to keep facelifting their ancient compact car with increasingly bizarre styling updates. The 62 Lark received a new front end with a grille that Road and Track described as looking like it was designed by someone who had only heard about cars but never actually seen one. The attempt to modernize this outdated vehicle resulted in a weird mismatch of styling elements, with the new face grafted awkwardly onto a body designed in the previous decade. Inside, the Lark continued Studebaker's tradition of strange ergonomics. The dashboard featured gauges placed seemingly at random, and the steering wheel was positioned at an angle that forced drivers into what one automotive journalist called a posture somewhere between a racing driver and someone having a heart attack. Mechanically, the Lark was equally disappointing. Its ancient engines, some dating back to the 1930s, were both underpowered and thirsty. The 259 cubic inch V8 wheezed out just 180 horsepower, while consuming fuel at a rate that would embarrass much larger cars. Consumer Reports noted that the Lark combines the fuel economy of a full-size car with the interior space of a compact, managing to fail at the very purpose for which it was designed. Number 7. 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado. The 1966 Oldsmobile Toronado was Detroit's answer to a question nobody asked. What if we took a massive V8 engine and made it drive the front wheels? The result was an engineering marvel that drove like a drunken elephant on roller skates. While the Toronado was revolutionary as America's first modern front-wheel drive car, the execution left much to be desired. Its massive 425 cubic inch V8 produced 385 horsepower, all sent to the front wheels through a tortured drivetrain that Car and Driver described as screaming in mechanical agony during hard acceleration. The Toronado's handling was its biggest letdown. With nearly 60% of its substantial 4,800-pound weight over the front wheels, it understeered so severely that Road and Track noted, turning the wheels sometimes feels like an exercise in wishful thinking. The massive hood would plow straight ahead in corners, giving drivers the distinct impression they were piloting a boat rather than a car. GM's engineers had to create an entirely new type of constant velocity joint to handle the Toronado's immense torque, but they couldn't solve the fundamental physics problem of putting that much power through steering wheels. The resulting torque steer was so violent during acceleration that one automotive journalist quipped, "The Toronado doesn't need a steering wheel, it needs a wrestling referee." Number 6, 1961 Chrysler Newport. The 1961 Chrysler Newport was what happened when accountants, not designers, created a luxury car. Chrysler's desperate attempt to offer a budget-friendly full-size model resulted in a vehicle so stripped down and cheaply made that automotive journalists openly mocked its pretensions to luxury. The Newport's styling was a weird mishmash of the previous year's imperial luxury cues grafted onto a body that had been ruthlessly cost-cut. The result was awkward proportions and details that didn't quite match, giving the car what Road and Track called the automotive equivalent of a knockoff designer's suit. The front end featured bizarre canted headlights that made the car look perpetually confused. Inside, The Newport offered what Chrysler ads called uncompromising luxury, but what Car and Driver more accurately described as vinyl that feels like it was sourced from medical examination tables. The dashboard featured cheap plastic, attempting to mimic wood grain so unconvincingly that one reviewer suggested it would fool only someone who had never seen an actual tree. Performance was equally disappointing. While the Newport came with Chrysler's 361 cubic inch V8, it was detuned to 265 horsepower in the interest of economy. The resulting acceleration was, according to one period road test, adequate for merging onto highways, assuming those highways were built before the invention of the freeway. Chrysler sold plenty of Newports, but primarily to taxi companies and police departments, cementing its reputation as the least prestigious luxury car in America. Number 5, 1968 Lincoln Continental Mark III. The 1968 Lincoln Continental Mark III was what happened when a talented car designer was forced to obey the tacky tastes of a company boss. Ford design chief Eugene Bourdonnais created this monument to excess specifically to please Ford President Lee Iacocca, who demanded more chrome, more luxury, and a Rolls-Royce grille. The result was a vehicle dripping with fake luxury signals, from its gaudy upright grille to the absurd Continental kit, trunk bulge that served no purpose other than visual bloat. The car was obscenely large at over 19 feet long, yet the interior was surprisingly cramped due to the massive hood and trunk. Car and Driver famously described it as the most inefficient use of sheet metal since the Titanic. Inside, the Mark III was a riot of fake wood, cheap chrome-plated plastic, and vinyl attempting to pass as leather. The dashboard featured more fake wood than a Hollywood Western set, applied in patterns so random that Road and Track quipped it looked like the work of a drunken carpenter with a veneer fetish. Despite, or perhaps because of, its vulgar styling, the Mark III was a huge sales success, outselling its rival, the Cadillac Eldorado. This commercial victory led Detroit down a path of increasingly gaudy luxury cars throughout the 1970s, with authenticity sacrificed on the altar of flash. As one automotive historian noted, the Mark III didn't just lower the bar for American luxury cars, it buried the bar completely. Number 4, 1963, Studebaker Avanti. The 1963 Studebaker Avanti was like that friend who shows up to a party dressed 20 years ahead of fashion, interesting to look at, but nobody wants to be seen with them. This fiberglass-bodied oddity was Studebaker's last desperate attempt to save itself from bankruptcy, and it showed in every bizarre styling choice. Designed by the famous Raymond Loewy team in just 40 days, the Avanti looked like nothing else on American roads, for good reason. Its asymmetrical hood scoop, lack of a traditional grille, and bulbous proportions led Car and Driver to describe it as a vehicle that appears to have been designed by at least 3 people who weren't speaking to each other. The interior was equally strange, featuring an aircraft-inspired cockpit with an overhead panel of switches and instruments placed seemingly at random. The seats were mounted unusually high, creating what Road and Track called the sensation of sitting on the car rather than in it. Many tall drivers reported their heads brushing against the headliner due to this quirky seating position. Studebaker's quality control issues plagued the Avanti from the start. The company contracted with a boat manufacturer to produce the fiberglass bodies, resulting in panels that often didn't fit together properly. Customers reported gaps wide enough to see daylight through, and doors that wouldn't close properly. Despite its innovative design and surprisingly good performance, production delays and Studebaker's imminent collapse meant only about 4,600 Avantis were ever built before the company shut down. Number 3, 1967 Cadillac Eldorado. The 1967 Cadillac Eldorado was Detroit's idea of sporty luxury, a concept they got as wrong as putting ketchup on ice cream. This bloated front-wheel drive barge was Cadillac's response to the personal luxury coupe trend, but with typical GM excess that resulted in a car weighing nearly 5,000 pounds. Designer Bill Mitchell created what he called a personal Cadillac, but there was nothing personal about its massive dimensions. The Eldorado stretched over 18 feet long while seating only 4 people comfortably. Car and Driver famously quipped that The Eldorado appears to have been designed with the turning radius of an oil tanker and the parking requirements of a small apartment building. Like its platform mate, the Oldsmobile Toronado, the Eldorado suffered from terrible weight distribution, with almost 60% of its substantial bulk over the front wheels. This resulted in handling that road and track described as like steering a shopping cart with a piano on the front. Under hard acceleration, torque steer was so pronounced that drivers had to grip the wheel with both hands to prevent the car from veering into oncoming traffic. Inside, the Eldorado epitomized tacky 60s luxury, with vinyl trying unconvincingly to look like leather and plastic mimicking wood. The dashboard featured a ribbon-style speedometer that was nearly impossible to read at a glance, leading one automotive journalist to suggest it was designed specifically to prevent drivers from knowing how fast they were going, perhaps as a mercy. Number 2, 1964. Imperial Crown. The 1964 Imperial Crown was Chrysler's grotesque attempt to out-Cadillac Cadillac, resulting in a car so garish it would make a Las Vegas casino blush. This massive land yacht was festooned with chrome in quantities that threatened global supply chains and featured styling that one automotive journalist described as baroque to the point of self-parody. Designer Elwood Engel, recently poached from Ford, created what might be the most overwrought front end in automotive history. The Imperial's face featured stacked headlights, a massive chrome grille, and protruding bumper guards that road and track said made it look like it's wearing orthodontic headgear. The rear wasn't much better, with bizarre freestanding taillights that resembled rocket pods. The Imperial's interior was a shrine to excess, with a dashboard that contained more fake wood than a furniture showroom, and upholstery options that included a pattern, car and driver, described as looking like the aftermath of a floral shop explosion. The front seats were so overstuffed and lacking in support that drivers complained of backaches after long journeys. Despite its luxury pretensions, the Imperial was plagued by quality issues. The complex power accessories frequently failed, the air conditioning system was notoriously unreliable, and the body was prone to premature rusting. Chrysler reportedly lost money on every Imperial sold, yet still couldn't match Cadillac's quality. As one automotive historian noted, the Imperial Crown perfectly demonstrated that simply adding more chrome doesn't make a car more luxurious. It just makes it more chromium. Number 1, 1960 Edsel Ranger. The 1960 Edsel Ranger earns the top spot as the most hated American car of the 1960s because it represented the embarrassing final gasp of Ford's $250 million mistake. By 1960, the Edsel was already a recognized failure, but Ford still had to sell leftover inventory of a car that had become a national punchline. For the final model year, Ford desperately tried to make the Edsel look more conventional by eliminating its most distinctive feature, the vertical horse collar grille. The result was a car that Road and Track described as a Ford with a thyroid condition, neither distinctive enough to attract attention nor conventional enough to avoid ridicule. It was the worst of both worlds. The 1960 Ranger was such a half-hearted effort that Ford didn't even bother creating unique body panels. It was literally a Ford Fairlane with different badges and slightly modified trim. Inside, the bizarre teletouch transmission buttons in the steering wheel hub were gone, replaced by a conventional column shifter. Even the distinctive rolling drum speedometer was replaced with standard Ford gauges. Sales were so dismal that Ford pulled the plug on the entire Edsel division in November 1959, just 2 months after introducing the 1960 models. Fewer than 3,000 1960 Rangers were sold, making them rare collector's items today. Not because they were good, but because almost nobody wanted one when they were new. The 1960 Edsel Ranger perfectly encapsulates Detroit's arrogance and tone deafness, a fitting end to what Businessweek called the car that sank an empire. So, which of these automotive disasters do you think was the absolute worst? Was it the dangerous Corvair, the bizarre Edsel, or another chrome-laden monstrosity that deserved to be crushed? Let us know in the comments below. And here's a controversial thought. Are today's bland, computer-designed crossovers actually worse than these cars? At least these failures had personality. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more automotive history disasters.